Bielek remains one of the most controversial and compelling figures to emerge from the world of alleged classified military experiments. His claims center around what has become one of the most mysterious and hotly debated events of the 20th century, the Philadelphia experiment. In 1990, Bielek publicly declared that he had not only witnessed the event, but had been a direct participant in it. His story would send ripples through research circles, not just because of what he said, but because of the extraordinary nature of his memories, which he claimed were repressed for decades. Bielek asserted that the trigger for these memories returning was the 1984 science fiction film, The Philadelphia Experiment. According to him, viewing the movie stirred something deep in his subconscious, breaking through mental blocks that had been deliberately placed there to suppress traumatic or classified memories. He believed that seeing the film was no coincidence, but rather a subconscious act guided by forces or intentions he couldn't fully explain. Once these memories began to resurface, they came in waves, detailed, persistent, and transformative. The central claim in Bielek's story is that the Philadelphia experiment occurred largely as depicted in the film. In essence, he believed the movie was not purely fiction, but a dramatized version of true events, perhaps even containing information deliberately seeded into the public domain. This concept, that truth might be cloaked in fiction as a form of limited disclosure, has circulated for decades among those who study hidden knowledge and covert operations. As Bielek tells it, he was not always known as Bielek. In his earlier life, he was Edward Cameron, a Navy officer serving aboard the USS Eldridge. He claimed that on October 28, 1943, the ship was at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, participating in a top-secret experiment purportedly designed to make it invisible to radar detection. According to Bielek, this experiment was not merely about radar cloaking, it involved manipulating the very fabric of space and time. The Philadelphia experiment has long been rumored to be based on theoretical work stemming from Albert Einstein's unified field theory. Further speculation suggests that research from figures like Nikola Tesla, whose papers were allegedly seized after his passing in early 1943, played a role in the development of the technology. Whatever the scientific basis, Bielek insists that when the equipment was activated, it enveloped the USS Eldridge in a strange greenish fog. Then, with a sudden flash of blue light, the ship vanished, not just from Philadelphia, but from time itself. Accounts from other sources, notably Carl Allen, also known as Carlos Allende, match some of Bielek's recollections. Allen claimed to have witnessed the disappearance of the Eldridge from another ship docked nearby. According to his letter to author Morris K. Jessup, the ship didn't just vanish, it reappeared briefly in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away, before vanishing again and returning to Philadelphia. What Bielek adds to this narrative is a personal and harrowing experience. He and his brother Duncan, also aboard the Eldridge, were caught in the chaos that ensued as the experiment unfolded. He described sailors becoming violently ill, disoriented, or mentally unstable. Some were reportedly fused into the steel structure of the ship, as though their physical forms were not fully reassembled when the vessel reappeared. These grotesque outcomes suggested to Bielek that the experiment had tampered with matter at a molecular level, without full understanding of the consequences. In an effort to escape the pandemonium, Bielek claimed that he and Duncan leapt overboard, only to find themselves falling not into water, but into an endless void. They blacked out, and later awoke in what they were told was the year 1983. According to Bielek, they had been transported 40 years into the future to a top-secret underground facility in Montauk, New York. This led him to another infamous alleged project, the Montauk Project. Bielek's description of the Montauk Project is as bizarre and fantastical as his Philadelphia claims. He stated that the facility housed advanced technology capable of manipulating time, consciousness, and even physical reality. There, he said, scientists were conducting experiments in mind control, time travel, and interdimensional travel. He believed that his and his brother's arrival in 1983 was no accident. It was a necessary part of a closed time loop created by the original Philadelphia experiment. His stories continued to evolve and expand in complexity. He claimed that after spending time in the Montauk facility, he was sent back to 1943 and later placed into a new identity, Bielek. His past as Ed Cameron was effectively erased, and he was raised in a new family. These assertions were accompanied by tales of memory suppression and eventual recall triggered by external stimuli, such as the movie. Despite the fantastical nature of his story, Bielek was able to speak at length and in great detail about supposed timelines, government cover-ups, and his role in experiments that defied known physics. He often pointed to technological achievements far ahead of their time, claiming he had witnessed future events and technologies that later became real. Though he offered no definitive proof, the consistency and conviction in his narrative kept people intrigued. Critics often dismissed his claims as fabricated or delusional, citing the lack of corroborating documentation and the extreme nature of his story. However, even skeptics admitted that Bielek's account was rich in detail and strangely cohesive. Supporters pointed to the consistency in his interviews, the circumstantial evidence surrounding the USS Eldridge, and the strange fate of individuals like Morris Jessup, who died under mysterious circumstances after receiving letters from Carlos Allende. One of the most chilling parts of Bielek's story is the psychological impact he described from these experiences. He spoke of the trauma of witnessing human beings melded with metal, of the confusion from time displacement, and of the burden of remembering events that most people either could not believe or refused to consider. He described these moments not merely as fantastical tales, but as deeply emotional experiences that altered his perception of reality. Though he passed away in 2011, Bielek's legacy endures in research communities and among those fascinated by the blurred lines between science fiction and suppressed reality. According to Bielek, after leaping from the USS Eldridge during the test in 1943, he and his brother Duncan found themselves not in the water, but in an endless, disorienting void. When they eventually regained consciousness, they were hospitalized, suffering from what he described not as traditional injuries, but as the result of prolonged contact with what he termed hyperspace. These were, in his view, not burns caused by radiation, but the consequence of exposure to a realm that transcended normal space and time. They were not in the 1940s any longer. Instead, Bielek claimed they had arrived in the year 2137. In one of his last interviews, he recalled being in poor physical condition and said that both he and his brother remained in medical care for about a month. During their stay, medical professionals allegedly briefed them on the state of the world and displayed maps showing a dramatically changed United States. According to Bielek, several major global events had reshaped civilization between 2000 and 2016. Although these events don't appear to have unfolded in our current timeline, he suggested that by 2025, things had reached a period of stabilization. This raised a deeper question about the accuracy of Bielek's recollections. Were these simply inventions or distortions, or was he experiencing reality from a divergent timeline? Perhaps, as he proposed, the future he saw in 2137 belonged to an alternate path of history, one that had since been altered by unknown factors. Without explanation, Bielek said he once again experienced a shift through time. This time, he emerged centuries further into the future, in the year 2749. According to him, this transition was not something he triggered himself, suggesting a higher intelligence or external force was controlling the movement. He remained in this future era for 2 years, adapting to life by taking up a role as a guide to others. His accounts of what he witnessed during this period were, by his own admission, incredible. As he described it, he once again awoke in a hospital. However, the medical environment was entirely unfamiliar. He claimed that he was treated using techniques that relied on sound frequencies and light-based therapies, far surpassing anything known in modern medicine. This type of healing, he explained, was the norm in that era and part of a more holistic and advanced approach to healthcare. Bielek also reported that the Earth, in this distant future, was governed by an artificial intelligence system. This central intelligence was described as crystalline in nature and communicated telepathically with humanity. In this future society, conventional currency had been abandoned, replaced by a system of credits which could be exchanged for goods and services. Governments, as we understand them, no longer existed, and organized conflict had seemingly been eradicated. He stated that much of the Earth's surface had changed. For instance, parts of Florida were submerged underwater, and the planet had undergone a polar shift. This shift had been halted only by the construction of an artificial pole by the scientific community of the time. Many people no longer lived on the ground. Instead, vast floating cities, controlled by gravitational technologies, moved freely around the planet. These cities were maintained and monitored by the Central Intelligence System, although some operated independently with their own localized control systems. According to Bielek, a segment of the population had chosen, or been forced, to live outside of these floating habitats. These individuals lived on the Earth's surface and were not considered part of the structured society. They were often seen as outcasts, separated from the rest of civilization by their refusal or inability to integrate into the system managed by artificial intelligence. Perhaps the most thought-provoking part of Bielek's account from the 28th century was his realization that no one seemed to know how the central computer had been created or who had designed it. When he asked residents of this time about the origins of the system, they reacted with confusion, as if the question itself was unfamiliar. The only answer he ever received was that the system had emerged sometime during the 26th century. This lack of clarity about the past sent a chilling message. Humankind may have surrendered control of its destiny without fully realizing it. Bielek would eventually return to a more familiar period, 1983, alongside his brother Duncan. There, both men were debriefed extensively. Their experiences had, by then, become part of a highly classified initiative, and they were assigned to work on further secret projects under the authority of the US government. However, circumstances shifted. Bielek, who was still known as Ed Cameron at that time, was considered problematic by those overseeing the operations. Rather than returning him to his original timeline, those in control decided to remove Ed Cameron from history by transferring his consciousness into a newborn child, Al Bielek, born in 1927. The memories of Ed Cameron were deeply buried and inaccessible to him for most of his early life, but later in adulthood, he began undergoing hypnotic therapy and gradually recovered these memories, leading to the incredible story he would later share. As these memories emerged, Bielek began to understand things about his childhood that had always felt unusual. For example, he recalled that as a baby, though unable to speak, he fully understood adult conversations around him. He attributed this advanced awareness to the consciousness of Ed Cameron residing within his new form. As time passed, he lived what outwardly appeared to be a regular life, working as an electrical engineer. But beneath the surface, fragments of his past and future began to come together. Eventually, he would remember being contacted again by government representatives in the early 1960s, ushering him back into a world of classified research. As his memories grew clearer, so too did his understanding of the extraordinary journey he had undertaken, one that spanned centuries and perhaps even crossed into alternate versions of reality. Whether taken as literal truth, psychological phenomenon, or a symbolic narrative, Al Bielek's story remains one of the most elaborate and thought-provoking accounts to emerge from the lore of alleged government experiments. His claims, filled with technological wonders, future societies, and warnings about artificial intelligence, continue to spark curiosity and debate, raising profound questions about time, memory, and the path humanity might one day take.